Yeah. Good afternoon. Welcome to our final candidate forum. I'm Dr. Sherry Simpkins, Dean of Instruction for General Studies, and I'm here to introduce Dr. Chad Crumbaker to you, and I'll give you kind of a brief bio on Dr. Crumbaker. Dr. Crumbaker is the Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs at West Virginia University, Parkersburg, where he works to foster creativity and innovation at the institution. He previously served as the chair of the Business, Accounting, and Public Service Division and is the coordinator of the Legal Studies program. He began his teaching career at WVU Parkersburg as an adjunct faculty, which eventually led to the opportunity to become a full-time faculty member and his service in nearly every role available to an instructor at the institution. Remaining an active teacher while serving as provost, he teaches and advises students in legal studies and in the first year experience courses. He's a passionate advocate for student success and the elimination of all barriers that get in the way of students achieving their goals. Dr. Crumbaker graduated from the University of South Carolina with a bachelor's degree in international studies and attended Capital University Law School, earning his Juris Doctorate. So welcome, Dr. Crumbaker. Just a few things. We'll go through 8 questions, and all of the questions were solicited from our NIC community, and then were themed and compiled down into 8 questions. But we'll give you a few minutes to do some opening remarks before we dive into those.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I wanted to go ahead and open the water in case I needed it. So thanks for being here this afternoon. I'm happy to be here. And I want to say first, it's a gorgeous campus. It's a gorgeous place. We got in yesterday and we're able to tour around a little bit, but I'm really happy to be here. And I wanted to share just, a few of my thoughts about my philosophy about higher education. And I think the main thing I really want to say to everyone as a group is that the question I ask myself and I ask everybody all the time is, what do students learn from you? And we are working in higher education for a reason, and that is that we do this to serve students so that students can pursue the job they want, the career they want, the future they want, and really to change the lives of their families and to pursue their dreams and to have something that they can be proud of and that can help them have fulfilling lives. And I think we're all here for that reason. And there's lots that we learn and students can learn from us every day. Everybody that works in higher education has a component. That's what we're ultimately after, is to serve that mission to have successful students, successful neighbors and community members that are out there and building our community, making it a stronger one, making a better world and all of those things. That's why we're here, and everyone has an important role in that. I think moving forward in higher education, there's a lot of challenges that are out there. Enrollment declines is kind of a thing across the country, but there is a tremendous opportunity in that. And those opportunities include being entrepreneurial and innovative and creative going forward, but also being very intentional about how is it that we can connect what we do in higher education to the future, to jobs for folks, so that people are interested in coming to college. They're able to do it in flexible ways. They're able to be successful, and they can do it in an affordable way and have access. And so I think that's ultimately what we're after in higher education. That's what drives me every day. Student success is my passion. It's something I worry about all the time. One of the things I say about our systems and how we think about higher education is we lose a lot of students to retention or attrition. They don't stay around, which is unfortunate. Some students never even try to come to us. But I'll tell you, the group that bothers me the most, the one I lose sleep over, are all those students that walk up to the door to get enrolled and they reach for the handle and they think it's not for them and they turn around and we never know they came. Those are the ones that worry me the most. And I always think about how is it that as an institution or as a whole system, how can we get rid of that imposter syndrome for students? How can we make opportunities available that they feel okay grabbing that door and they know they're going to be welcomed and that they know that they can get registered for college and they can do the things they came there to do? Something got them that far. Sometimes I think we get in the way of them going all the way in. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for coming out today, and I look forward to responding to questions. Thanks.
Thank you. First question, why are you interested in being the president of North Idaho College? What is your understanding of the challenges and opportunities facing the college?
Yeah, so why do I want to be at North Idaho College? Well, first of all, I already said it. This is a gorgeous place. It's a gorgeous campus. I'm sure that you all have seen that students are attracted here for that same reason. You all are attracted here for that same reason. So that maybe is the thing that caught my attention. But I also looked at, your opportunities to expand and be economic drivers. You have major investment and career and technical education opportunities. You have great facilities. These are awesome facilities that when you go around, you can see that some of them aren't brand new, but they all look brand new. I mean, it's really an impressive place in that sense. But looking at your systems and how it is that you're looking at advancing into the future, that's what's exciting to me. That's what's interesting when I think about, what am I interested in? That's it. Looking at the future of how we can serve and drive our regions to serve the next generation and the current generation that want to get upskilled and reskilled and reemployed and all those things. That's what I see in the institution. That's what drew me to apply. That's what draws me to stand in here in front of you today. So there's lots of opportunities to connect more and more about what happens here to the jobs of the future and those kinds of things. Challenges, obviously, there are some major challenges that are out there around some governance things, accreditation. Those are all things that we have to navigate together. I think that's the key part is together, collaborative, be real, figure out how we can move forward, how we can be successful. You're all here because you ultimately are interested in the mission of serving students. That's what it's all about. We get back to that as we always come to that. That's our guiding principle. How do we serve the students in our region? How do we serve our community? And I think those challenges can be overcome through hard work, but through also really connecting to that mission and that vision to support students.
If you came to an impasse with the Board of Trustees on an issue that you felt extremely passionate about, how would you proceed?
So I'm a collaborative person. I may come to an impasse, and I feel like most impasses for me are temporary. They're about trying to really communicate with one another, how to think about aligning expectations. Most people, again, I'll go back to our mission. Our mission is to serve students. And when we think about that, if we can think about how we come to these problems or these places where we think we're at different points, we're probably not that far apart. So some of my experience is in mediation and negotiation. Those are interests. I'm a lawyer. You heard that part. I've done that kind of work, and thinking about how you can align expectations to get resolutions that maybe don't result in court hearings. Those are important. And one of the fundamental purposes of the court system to avoid going to court. I mean, that really is the idea. You hope to not need that, but ultimately, it's talking about expectations and aligning what it is that our needs are. How do we come up with solutions that work for everybody? And that's what it's about. It's trying to be collaborative and intentional around that, and how to figure out how do we serve the goal we're actually after. Usually, things where disagreements or places where you come to loggerheads it has to do more with maybe a miscommunication or misunderstanding and misaligned expectations. And really getting those in line is what helps to get past those points. And so that's how I approach, really from a mediation, negotiation type standpoint. And one thing about a negotiation, I don't know if you know this, but it's that neither side's completely happy. That's usually a good negotiation. Now you want to get as close to that as you can, but neither side gets completely happy in a good negotiation typically.
Please discuss your experience with navigating the pandemic in a higher education setting, and describe how that experience would inform how you might approach higher education in the future.
Yeah, so I'm a provost, and I was in March 2020 when it first hit, and then we closed our campus, basically one day after the day we decided we were going to. So I've navigated that process, and I think we lost a lot for several months for sure in terms of what we were doing, but we all proceeded forward. We tried to focus on how do we get students to learn the things they need to learn. People came up with all kinds of neat and innovative ways to do that. It tired us out. It made us fatigued. Those are hard work that happens during that time. we're not over it. We all know that we're not over the fatigue of all that work. And hopefully we're getting closer to where maybe this is going to be a new normal and it won't be as disruptive. It's still going to have a disruptive component. But navigating that, I think what we learned in particular was that you can move and use technology in new ways to instruction and in meeting with people. There's a lot of efficiencies that come from not having maybe to travel to the other part of the state to learn something good that's happening someplace else. And so we learned those ways to use those, the technologies to help us teach, to help us interact with one another, to do it more efficiently. I think of it in instruction as, I call it technology-enabled instruction. I don't think it's just technology provided. It's instruction, and we can use it in various ways. And some of those ways, there's the online only. It's only when that part, there's no live component. That's one way we've thought of instruction, mainly online. That's how we've thought of it. But there's a long way between face-to-face and that. And I think that what we've learned in this period is that we can all do more to enable instruction, to make it more flexible, to really maybe focus on things that need live interaction and collaboration with students and instruction. And I think using those kinds of tools, we've enhanced our efficiencies on some things. We've also gotten tired because we're learning new things faster than we expected to. There was a study not that long, or just recently, that said essentially we've done 32 years worth of change if it had stayed the same path in 2. And so that's pretty significant. That's why we're all tired, is we're trying to change that fast and in a timeline that should have taken much longer. But now we know we can, and that's a very empowering thing. Now we also kind of want to maybe slow down that pace of change a bit so that we can then embrace the things that we've learned during the last couple of years. And I think that's what we can do is really look at how do we use it to our advantage? How do we leverage that to serve students in more flexible ways that they're asking for, ways that they think that would help them be successful, and ultimately, how do we connect them to the jobs that they're looking for, the careers and the futures that they're looking for.
NIC has multiple locations in the region. How would you ensure, let me find the right lane. Yep. How would you ensure faculty and staff feel like one big team despite being miles apart?
Yeah, always geography and distance always makes there be a mental distance as well. One of the advantages, of course, again, go back to technology. We know we can collaborate that way, maybe independently from our own desks, but maybe in a couple of rooms. Right now, how many people are online with us at the moment? We're all here, but they're here too. Not necessarily exactly in the same way, but we have that ability to interact and have meetings at the distance so we don't lose the time of travel. So how do we interact? One is we can involve more people more easily. And that's a big piece in terms of making it one big group and pulling in the same direction. But I think it's ultimately about focusing on a mission and a vision that are together, communicating that regularly, having people involved in the decision-making so that they're not left aside and don't feel isolated from decision-making. I think that's one of the things that has happened during the pandemic is that we're inundated with so much information. We're used to screens much more than we used to be. There for a while, probably a lot of us streamed more television shows than we would admit over the time. We didn't have other things to do. We needed a break from something else. So screens were all over. So we have that, kind of thinking about how do we tune that back, but how do we also interact? And I think the other piece is we need to really connect with each other at personal levels. We kind of need to reintroduce ourselves to one another. There's new people all over at the institutions that we need to be introduced and reintroduced to. And I think those are important, kind of pulling in those directions and figuring out how we can connect and communicate at better levels. So.
How would you tackle the issue of staffing and faculty shortages in today's labor market?
That's a hard one. So yeah, that's not impacting just higher ed, that's for sure. We have employers that are knocking on the door every day in higher ed looking for more pipelines of skilled employees. And they're also asking us to help create the pipelines. They're also asking us to to create programs that match the needs they have. We're seeing all of that occurring. At the same time, some of those heaviest need industries, it's hard to get instructors for those areas. And that existed before 2020, before there were some employment challenges in that sense. And so the hard part there is making it, I think, a culture and an environment that's fun to be a part of, and that we can connect with, and that we can see the benefits of our labors, and we can really have a good organization. That's going to be one of the key pieces. We have to be a go-to destination, not just for students, but for also employees, faculty, and staff all across the campus. We should be that. If we can be that, yes, people don't do this to volunteer. They want to get paid. We all need to be paid to do the work. But, that isn't the only thing that's important in terms of staying or coming. There are other parts. We have to be, provided the resources and support, the trust and confidence that we can do our jobs, and that we're going to be a good employer. But we should have, candidates that come for that. It's always going to be harder. It's harder. The cost of living increases aren't going to make it any easier. These are all challenges that we have to try to navigate and figure out what do we do with that? The students have that same problem. Where are they going to live if they were to come here from out of town? Those are all factors as well. And so, those are all challenges. We're not alone in those, but ultimately I think we like to work hard, but we also like to have fun doing it. And having fun as a principal piece of the vision, I think, is important. Just because you're having fun doesn't mean you aren't serious when you need to be. Doesn't mean you're not focusing on the work you need to get done. It doesn't mean you're not serious about accomplishing goals, but it creates the place you want to be. It helps to recruit and retain employees. And it also, that bleeds down into how students feel about engaging in their own education. And that's going to be important in the long term, really, probably trying to keep up with cost of living changes, is having better enrollment and then get engagement with students. Their sense of belonging at a campus is one of the biggest indicators of student success. Whether or not they believe they belong here and that they can stay and they can do it is a big piece. And that starts really with all the people they interact with. And the more we have that opportunity, I think the better we'll be as an institution. But also I think the rising tide of the financial pieces are also in part built into that model.
Please describe your experience with supporting diversity-related programs within your institution.
Did you say
diversity-related programs
my
in the
experience
institution?
Okay, thank you. So probably, one thing on my campus, we have something called the Open Project. It's opening pathways to equity now. It's a institution-wide group that's involved with programming and identifying things that we can connect more to diversity, equity, inclusion, and that. I've been involved. I'm not specifically on that group, but I'm encouraging around those things. Really, I focus on those areas, particularly around equity and how we can level the playing field in our system. And I looking at data and considering that how our systems play in to where we're seeing equity gaps across various areas, what students are staying, what students are successful, what programs they're in, breaking it down by those things. But ultimately, I think really improving equity and eliminating equity gaps has to do with systems changes. I have something I call the life cycle of a student, which essentially looks at our system, everything. It's the status that a student has through the entire process they have with an institution. So I'll give you the first 2 or 3 steps. Essentially are the first status a student has with us is that a prospect. They're potentially a student. They may exist out in the world. So they have a status, and there are things that we should do to move them from a prospect to an applicant in our system. And what that means is there are all these people, and it's like the world is our prospective student, right? Well, what do we do to specifically target individual groups is the arrow between the 2 points, prospect to applicant. And we think about all the various inputs into that arrow that are all the people in this room, online, are involved in that. How do we move the student from not knowing about us, not knowing about our programs, not knowing why they might want to see us, to getting them to apply, And then really it goes further. We get them admitted, we get them registered for classes, we get them to come to the first day of class. That's also a big important piece. But there's all these little pieces that we have to do in that process to make sure that the students who might not know how to navigate our really complicated system learn how to do it. And if we're intentional and push those things into those arrows, I think that's one way, a big way we can achieve more diversity, equity, inclusion in our system and in our institution, is to make sure we don't assume that students know already how to get to graduate and beyond. They don't already know that. I'm going to say it one more way that I liked. I think it's a good way to frame it. I say that the world is full of complex organizations, and higher education is, for most people, the first complex organization they will encounter. And it may be among the most complex that exist. We have funny titles. We have things that don't mean anything to people. They've never been here. We have acronyms that we use all the time, like what's a FERPA, right? That could be a thing, but it's actually, a law. I like to say the one about a provost. And who knows what's a provost? Nobody does, right? I hold that title. But those are all important things that they need help with to navigate, to be successful. And we should be the place that helps people learn to navigate a complex organization. And then we need to do that if we want them to be successful with us and be successful after us.
Please share examples of experience you have in resource development, such as fundraising and grants, and why you feel your experience can help to advance the mission of North Idaho College.
Sure. So I'll give you a couple of examples. One that I've been really heavily involved in is one that came from the Arnold Foundation, and it has to do with a replication of the CUNY's ASAP model, the Accelerated Study and Associate Programs, that aims basically to increase the percentage of students that graduate with an associate degree on time, which is in 3 years as your typical metric. We were able to work in our system, through our system, to get funding for that, about almost $2 million to support replicating that program in rural America, which hadn't been done. And it's been in CUNY, and it's been at a couple of other institutions, Nashville, and a couple in California, and a couple in Ohio. But basically that program was about how do you replicate this program that helps more students retain and complete their degrees on time. Now, how do we develop that program? How do we develop the resources for that in order to get that grant? That had to do mostly with our successes that we'd had on the ground with some major changes that we did in our system involving, they were the Complete College America initiatives or components. I don't know if you all are familiar with those, but basically momentum years, co-requisite support for math and English, 15 to finish. Academic maps is a key component, and proactive advising. So in our work with that, we'd done that and seen significant gains. We moved essentially our retention, fall to fall retention, from about 50% to 70% initially. It settled into the 60% level. We started to see, basically we doubled the number of students who finished college level math in the first year through those initiatives. We also saw that essentially full-time students were completing 3 more credit hours per semester on average, successfully completing them. So with that in hand, the success that we developed through that is what largely enabled us to make the move to this replicating ASAP. And I think the reason that works is that when a foundation or a business or the government's, the federal government and its grant applications, any of those places, sees the successes that you have, that you put forward successes, it's much easier to convince them and to get support to continue those initiatives. And I can further that to say, after the first year of that program that we saw significant gains again in terms of that specific group of students that are part of that program, that there were still like double-digit increases in retention and persistence and completion. And as a result, we got another grant, another foundation supported that same program with an additional approximately $100,000 to support continuing work there. Another example I can share is we were a Metallica Scholar institution, which I know you all are too. Ours was about really connecting our employers in the CIT and CS programs. We're saying that students should have more industry recognized credentials when they complete. And so we went, that was our fund application to Metallica Scholars, was to fund the exams themselves, which we also realized what we missed when we thought about that was that we really wanted to make sure they were ready for those exams. So we put in some study supports to help them do that. So we're in the cohort 3, if y'all are familiar. You're cohort 1, I think. So that was another way. So we got that as a result of kind of moving and connecting those workforce needs into our programs.
Please share your experiences with student involvement and how you champion different student engagement activities and initiatives.
Sorry, I was catching my breath there for a second. So in student involvement, I believe in this. There's in my office, I shared this earlier, but it's something I firmly believe in. In my office, there's a sign that says, I had them make me a poster that says, those who do the work, do the learning. And what that means to me essentially is that if you want students to learn, if you want anybody to learn, you may have them apply their learning in an environment. And so when I think of student involvement, it's got to be their thing. And I mean, we support it, but we have to create opportunities for them to explore their interests. When you talk about the student government organizations, when you talk about how do you engage students around other, fun activities, but also discipline-oriented activities, they got to be the leaders. They got to be the ones that perpetuate it, that are interested in bringing their friends to it and to putting on the events and running the meetings. And it's all about them. I already went in a student organization when I was in college. I don't need to run another one. I'm happy to help them. And I think it's a great place for them to learn leadership. They'll learn leadership successes and they'll learn leadership failures. And there's no better place to do that than in college, because there's an opportunity for more learning as a result of it. Because I think that we all need to have opportunities to both learn how to win and we need to learn how to fail. And that both of those things are important in terms of how we succeed into the future. Another example I had is during the pandemic, I've always wanted really to have a leadership or a leadership academy or an honors college eventually. And so what I did was I actually started a chapter of the NSLS. I don't know if y'all have heard of that. It's a national organization. I started that up to try to create, because they have the curriculum around leadership. And I've started that up in order to try to get a group of students engaged that would get some learning out of it, and to try to really build from the first year into other student organizational leadership, so that we could build some good opportunities for student organizations to rebuild after the pandemic and those kinds of things. And so that's another big area that we've been involved in. I think it's all about student leadership. They lead the groups. They'll lead the groups to more engagement. They'll bring their friends. They learn from it. And that's part of our processes. That's part of what we're doing as educators, is not just teaching them class subjects, but also teaching them all the things that wrap around with the whole part of the college experience. So that's my experience in that area.
All right, that brings us to the end of our questions, but we want to give you the rest of the time to provide any closing remarks that you may have.
Okay, thanks. I must have talked really fast then. You already noticed that, didn't you? I didn't mean to. I thought I was slowing down. Well, anyway, so I told you about the life cycle of the student. I wanted to share that. It's a big piece of, I think, how you look at your systems processes, but and I think how you can look at inputs and how you make sure that you're like being really intentional about having student success, removing barriers to their successes, and making sure, I think it increases retention and completion over time. So anyway, that's one of the big areas, but I wanted to kind of lay out like a little bit of my philosophy, and I'm going to use some buzzwords, but I mean them. I'm all about entrepreneurship and innovation. But I'm also, and I think also really important is trust, collaboration, and transparency. And so those are like big items for me in terms of how I think about leadership. Is we got to build trust. I have to build trust, and I have to be transparent. Tell people what's going on, how they make decisions. And by doing that, then it enables other people to know how you make decisions and how collectively we can collaborate to create better results for our institution, for everything that we're doing. And I think we should do that in innovative and entrepreneurial ways. It should be no mistake or mystery to anybody here that, higher education is largely under attack from various other providers. Certainly community colleges have those under attack. The 4 years, or as their enrollment goes down, they're wanting more of our students. In that sense, we also see major international companies getting into the game, and they're going to try to do it quicker, faster, and less expensively because they know they can. And we have to think about what's the future look like for us as higher ed and post-secondary ed. It's probably not always going to be within the four walls of a classroom or the 15 weeks or 16 weeks of a semester. It's about how do we tie the learning outcomes that students need to achieve in each course or in each program to the jobs that they're hoping to get in the future. And that's really a big component of what we need to do in higher education is look at what are those next opportunities. Kind of one final thing I would say is that you can go Google this or look anywhere and try to figure out what are the top skills that employers are looking for today. And if you look at a list, and I could just give you one I saw the other day, it's like 15 different items. And those items ranked in like importance level by percentage essentially are critical thinking, analytical thinking, communication orally, communication written, getting along with people, so small groups and those kinds of things. When you get to the very bottom one on this list of least still important, but at the lowest is the other category. And that other category are those things we would have typically thought of as like hard skills, those technical skills that we develop in programs. But basically the other 14 are all the things that we've traditionally thought of were the soft skills or the things that, those things that we thought came from other places besides the classroom. Why do you come to class? Why do you come to learn these technical skills? But we also know that, our general education, the whole point is to teach those first 14 skills. That's a big piece of it. And if we're not, that's an important part of how we create lifelong learners, because that last category, those companies, those employers, they know how to give those skills. And they want us to help get the basics and get them started and get started into the first career. But they also want all these other things that are harder for them to create. They're harder for us to do too. We all know that. Tell me how exactly by the end of the day, you're going to teach somebody critical thinking. I want to hear that. You're welcome to have the floor. But that's really hard, right? But how do we create that opportunity for students so that they can come in and out of that skill piece, that hard skill, that technical skill that the employers are going to look for? Because what they really want is somebody who can solve problems, knows how to do it, communicate with people, not make other people mad while they're doing it. And that's what we can help develop, not only through what happens in the classroom, but what happens across campus, because we all learn things. All students learn things from all of us. And those are the things that are also important in their learning. They're not secondary. They're right in the middle. They're part of the same umbrella of what is it to be a college student and what is the outcome we hope to achieve when they graduate and they're ready to start jobs. So that's the last I have to say, but I appreciate everybody's time and coming and listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Crumbaker. Let's give him a round of applause. We appreciate the opportunity to learn from your experience, and I'm glad to know why the pandemic has made me so tired. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Just a reminder to our audience that we have our online feedback form, and we ask you to go on there and provide any feedback you might have on Dr. Crumbaker. The Board of Trustees will receive that feedback, and so it's important that we can help provide them any information. So again, thank you, Dr. Crumbaker. Thank you. Hearing your philosophy on general education, that's some of the areas I appreciate.